Alright, hi again, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the curve tool. Now, some users have addressed some confusion or some concerns about the way the curve tool works and not quite understanding how it's supposed to work. And this could be because it's really a general purpose tool. It's not meant to work just one specific way, but it's meant to be really flexible because there's really no two Howler users that do exactly the same thing. They're very creative people, and they tend to do a broad range of different things. So we tend to keep our tools really general purpose. But anyways, let's take a look. We've selected the curve tool, and we'll add a few control points. As you can see here, very simple so far. You mouse over the points, and they become highlighted, and you can also see a little bit of a highlight where a next point might be inserted. You can also close a curve simply by clicking on it. There's also a open and close curve button at the top if you want to do that manually with a button. There's a control handle here that you can move things. And there are some other options such as free transform where you can rotate, scale, shear, and that sort of thing. There's also the ability to store a curve for later use if you want to work on something different and come back to that curve. You can also store multiple curves as well, so you can have several copies like that if you want to work on multiple curves. But anyways, what you see here though is basically this red outline, and that's just the path. That's not the final result you're going to get if you finish working with this. Really what you want to do is apply a brush stroke to this, or fill a shape, or make a selection out of it. So there are options across the top here under the area called finish. The primary one is to stroke a brush along a path, and this will use whatever brush or media you happen to have open. So I might have airbrush open by default, but we can go ahead and load something else in there, and it'll use that instead. So if I clear this and do that again, we see this little splotchy brush here. Go back to the curve tool and click finish again, and you'll get a completely different look. So that's one way to use it, but you might want something more just simple. So probably the best thing to use for that is maybe one of the pens because they're very smooth. So let me go to the pen media here. It's like pen and ink, perhaps. No, pen and ink has variable size. Let's just find a simple pen, like large simple right here, and try stroking by that. And there you go, a very smooth anti-alias looking curve. So that's the basics of using the curve tool. There's a lot more you can do with it, of course. I mean, it does everything up to rotoscoping for film work, rotoscoping for compositing in film, and that kind of thing. That can be found on the rotoscoping menu there. But we're not going to talk about that today, though. That gets involved. It can also be used to create animated curves and all kinds of things. There's some other options here, though. If you want to create a brushstroke that looks more like a pen, that has kind of, it starts out fine and it gets thicker and thicker and then it goes back to being fine. There's that option as well here, still under the finish tab. And then there's you might want to use this to fill a shape. You can do that right next to it. Of course, it'll use the currently selected color, so you can fill a shape. And then say you wanted to fill a shape and then maybe you wanted to outline it, you can also do that. So first fill it and then click on the outline, and you'll have a filled shape like that. Another thing you can do is create a selection with it, and you might want to even make a boolean, like cut a hole out of that somehow. So let me scale this down a bit, and I'll go down here and do this again. Let me finish that free transform first. Do this again, and instead of replace, I'll put subtract there. And as you can see, we've just cut a hole in that selection. Very powerful stuff. And there's another option here. If we had an animation, we could animate a brush moving along that curve. We could even animate a animated brush moving along that curve. For example, an animated brush of a person walking could walk along this curve. Very powerful stuff. So keeping that in mind. But this is also a drawing tool, so there's more yet we can do with it. Let me clear this, and let me clear this selection. So you'll notice here there's a word catmull. We can also use B-spline curves. This is a little bit more refined, a little bit smoother looking curve. A little bit different than the catmull ROM splines in the way it works. It uses a a cage around the curve instead of editing the points in the curve directly. But it's very similar in concept. It gives you a little bit of a smoother, more finished look. And we're going to use that, and we're going to use the second option here. The first option being the ability to add points, but sometimes you just want to draw a freehand curve. So that's what we're going to use here. And we're just going to click and drag, and you can see we're able to now draw a curve just by working with the pen and drawing it that way. Sometimes it's not, you don't want that line closed, so we're going to turn that close option off right there, and we get a open, non-closed curve. And this is great, and we can do the same things we did before. We could put stroke a brush along that and stuff. But sometimes you just want to draw a couple of curves in a row. So we're going to go here where it says auto, and there's a we're going to check that. And now that every time we draw a curve, that's going to automatically fill in that brush stroke for us. And we can also do that option where we have it look like a brush stroke. Let me make that a little bigger so we can see it. And there you go. That is the basics of using the curve tool. These are also fully editable. So once you've drawn that curve, you can go in and use the move points and start moving points around. You can still do this with it and that sort of thing. It's still an editable curve, but it's sort of also a drawing tool at the same time. So keep that in mind. And that particular combination of things will give you a good result using these the pen and ink or the felt or one of these in the pen category, because it uses the on the settings tab here, there's a option. Instead of using a custom brush, you can use a algorithmic pen, which is very smooth. It's fully anti-aliased and sub-pixel precise, and that sometimes gives a better result for these really fine marks you want to make. So by using a combination of that and this the second option here on the curve tool, you can make these really nice freehand drawn curves, and also by using that B-spline instead of the Catmull ROM, which creates really a better looking curve in my opinion. Internally, when you use the drawing tool, it is interpolated, it is making a curve, but it's using that Catmull ROM spline by default. So sometimes if you want a better quality line drawing, like for ink work or cartoons or manga or something, this might be the way to go, because that B-spline will give you a better overall finished result, and a little more control over it too, because you can copy these curves, you can duplicate them, you can refine them, and work with them more. So I can move that and then add another curve to it, or duplicate that. You know, you can make an array of these things if you wanted to, or something. I don't know. You can probably find some useful creative purpose for doing that. I don't know exactly why, but you can probably find a use for that. Anyway, so that's an introduction to the curve tool. Thanks for watching, and talk to you later.